In the summer of 2021, an incident described as a satisfying example of instant karma by netizens reacting to it occurred in Guildford, Western Sydney, Australia. A Facebook video showed an unnamed bicycle thief was actively pursued by a motorist. The suspect turned around to yell at the driver and at one point appeared to give them the middle finger. Moments after taunting his pursuer, the thief crashed into a stationary vehicle. He went flying over the handlebars, slammed his head into the side of the car and dropped to the ground, likely leading to the bicycle's recovery. Funniest thing I've seen all week, one user wrote after the clip was uploaded to social media. Number 7. Andre Young. 52-year-old Ohio man Andre Young attempted to rob a speedway off Northland Boulevard in Forest Park on October the 23rd of 2017. Young reportedly brandished a box cutter and threatened the male cashier, saying, "We can do this the easy way or the hard way." He was then captured on CCTV attempting to jump over the counter. In the moments that followed, the worker walked from behind the counter and charged Young, flooring him with a powerful punch to the face. While the would-be robber lay flattened, the worker, whose identity wasn't revealed, dispossessed him of the blade. According to WLWT, he then called 911 and told the operator that he'd been forced to knock the man out, asking them to send a trooper and adding, "He's in here all effed up." Following his arrest, Young told the police that he was about to buy a beer and that he wasn't using the box cutter to rob the place but to cut something from his jacket. However, when pressed further, he said, "Man, I was drunk." Photos taken in the incident's aftermath showed Young bearing the physical consequences of his actions, as his left eye was black and swollen shut. He was seen using crutches to support himself during a subsequent court appearance. The man, who reportedly had 5 prior felony convictions, was charged with aggravated robbery and assault and given a $175,000 bond. Number 6. Incident in Varzea, Paulista. In the summer of 2022, surveillance cameras in a residential area of Varzea Paulista in Sao Paulo, Brazil, captured a man on a motorcycle pulling up alongside a couple outside their home. After a short conversation, the motorcycle rider reached into his jacket and tried brandishing a pistol. The man sprang into action and grabbed the robber's weapon, wheeled in hand, raising it in the air. His partner rushed in and aided him in wresting the weapon, which turned out to be a replica from the would-be robber. The latter then fell with the motorbike, which pinned one of his legs. The couple proceeded to batter the suspect. The man punched him repeatedly in the head while he was still trapped under the bike as the woman struggled to gain control of the weapon. The duo then dragged him into the street, where they took him down and continued to punch, kick and pistol whip him. The couple restrained the assailant until local law enforcement arrived to take him into custody. In the aftermath of his arrest, it emerged that the motorcycle he'd rode to the attempted robbery had been recently reported stolen in the nearby state of Campinas. Many of those commenting on the viral surveillance footage lauded the couple for turning the tables on the criminal, including El Salvador President Nayib Bukele, who tweeted "The power of love" along with a heart emoji. Number 5. Lionel Alexander. On April the 27th of 2018, Houston law enforcement was called to a home on the city's east side where 64-year-old Lionel Alexander had been killed. The man's wife, Janet, who was at the time in her late 60s, told officers that she'd stabbed her husband in self-defense. He'd reportedly come at her with a knife, which she was able to wrestle out of his hands. Janet then relentlessly slashed and stabbed Lionel with an autopsy, subsequently revealing that the man had sustained roughly 89 strikes. A year later, in April of 2019, the police returned to the home to serve the woman with an arrest warrant after a grand jury had indicted her on murder charges. The arrest attempt would make headlines after Janet set herself and her house on fire while the police were at her door. She was injured and her home nearly burned to the ground as a result. During the murder trial that followed, it would be revealed that Lionel had subjected Janet to extensive emotional and physical abuse throughout their marriage of more than 40 years. Houston police confirmed that officers had been called to their home multiple times in the past for incidents stemming from Lionel's domestic abuse. Janet's defense argued, She finally just snapped. She couldn't take it anymore, and when he threatened her, she decided it was time to finally fight back. The trial, which unfolded in the fall of 2022, lasted 6 days, and Janet's children supported her throughout the proceedings. The jury found the woman not guilty, and in the verdict's aftermath, jurors expressed their surprise that Janet hadn't fought back sooner. Number 4. Barbara Sheen. In February of 2008, New York City woman Barbara Sheen called 911 from her Howard Beach home and told the operator, I shot him, I think he's dead, he's in the bathroom." Barbara was talking about her 49-year-old husband, Raymond, a former New York City police sergeant. She'd shot the man to whom she'd been married for 24 years with 2 guns, a 9mm Glock and .38 caliber revolver, both of which were owned by him. Raymond succumbed to his injuries in the home after he was shot 11 times, and his spouse was arrested for murder. At her trial, Barbara's legal team relied on the battered woman defense, arguing that the shooting had been the consequence of her suffering extensive abuse at Raymond's hands for years. She opened fire on him with the revolver while he was in the bathroom shaving, after he'd reportedly pointed the Glock at her and threatened to kill her if she didn't go on holiday to Florida with him. The woman claimed that she was certain he would end her life at some point during the trip. Some of Raymond's past acts of violence towards Barbara were revealed during the trial. Following an argument in 2007, he slammed the woman's head against a cinder block, and on the day of the killing, he'd allegedly punched her in the face and thrown boiling pasta sauce on her. After gunning Raymond down with the revolver, Barbara also unloaded the Glock on him. The prosecution, however, stated that Barbara hadn't been in a violent relationship and that she was actually angry at Raymond for his infidelities and peculiar preferences in the bedroom, which included wearing nappies and women's clothes. Barbara's children voiced their support for her, shedding light on the hellish household. Barbara's daughter, Jennifer Joyce, reported that her mother had had no choice but to defend herself as Raymond had a gun to her head. The woman's son, Ray, said of those doubting the abuse, "I don't think they understand how my father threatened to kill us, and how if we told anybody about what he was doing, he would kill us too." On October the 7th of 2011, a Queens jury acquitted Barbara of murder. Her friends and family, some of whom were wearing purple to show their support for domestic violence victims, cheered. As the verdict was read, the jury agreed with her defense that the initial shooting had been justified, but found the woman guilty on weapons charges for using the Glock to fire additional shots. She received a 5-year term, which she appealed, but which was ultimately upheld in Queens Supreme Court. When Barbara showed up to court to be transferred to Rikers Island and begin serving her sentence, her supporters remained steadfast in their bolstering, telling the woman, "We love you, Barbara, and you're our hero." Number 3. Incident in London. In the spring of 2020, the video of an altercation between 2 men near the East London Mosque in the borough of Tower Hamlets went viral on Facebook. In the clip, one of the men recorded the other, who had white hair and seemed older, and confronted him over the utterance of a racial slur. The word was typically used to demean people of Pakistani descent, particularly those living in the UK. The white-haired man not only confirmed that he'd said the word, but nonchalantly motivated his actions by saying, "Because you are," as he continued tapping the screen of his own cell phone. The man recording, stunned by his casually racist attitude, questioned him once more. The elderly man stood by his hateful words and, while displaying a satisfied smile and buttoning his cell phone, said, "Because you are. Next question, if you've got one." The victim then said, "Flip him waist, man," to which the white-haired man replied, "No, you are the waist. What are you wearing? You are in Northern Europe." He wouldn't get to finish his thought, as he was dealt a thunderous blow by the man he'd just insulted. The image sharply panned right and then returned to the original point of filming, showing the white-haired man several feet away, knocked on his back with his legs in the air. Many of the users reacting to the clip described the strike as well-deserved, while others argued that, regardless of the circumstances, the man shouldn't have reacted with violence. Today's topic was requested by 6 Confessions. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Curtis Sanders. On October the 11th of 2016, a mask-wearing robber stormed into the Comet Food Market in Fort Lauderdale, Florida with a pistol pointed at the man behind the counter. The initial incident was captured on CCTV. The suspect, later identified as 30-year-old Curtis Sanders, then jumped over the counter and chased the unidentified clerk into a back room and out of the surveillance camera's view. Seconds later, a shootout ensued. The clerk was able to grab a gun of his own, prompting Sanders to open fire and shoot him in the face. When the clerk returned fire, he wounded Sanders multiple times. As he re-entered the camera's view, the perpetrator dropped face down to the floor where he remained motionless for a few seconds. Sanders then removed his mask and got back to his feet. He staggered back over the counter with blood visible on his shirt. He was arrested a short time later and taken to a hospital where he received treatment for his gunshot wounds. According to updates on the matter, he was reported as being in stable condition, while the clerk's injuries weren't described as serious. At the time of the failed robbery, Sanders had already spent more than 5 years in prison for burglary and grand theft. For the latest incident, he faced felony charges of armed robbery, attempted murder, and possession of a weapon by a convicted felon. Stick around after number 1 in case you missed our release about when karma goes right from a while ago. Number 1. Daniel Gustavo Guero. In the early hours of January the 11th of 2015, Alexis Jimenez returned to his residence in Tucumán, western Argentina, after giving his girlfriend a ride home. 22-year-old Alexis was then set upon by 2 men. Hearing the commotion, his older brother, Cesar, went into the street and tried to intervene in the robbery. One of the assailants, Daniel Gustavo Guero, brandished a 9mm pistol and shot Cesar in the neck. Neighbors were awoken by the gunfire, which occurred at around 5:30 a.m. They emerged from their homes and some tended to Cesar while an angry mob went to find the shooter. Within minutes, they caught up with Guero and began mercilessly beating him. When the police arrived at the scene, they found the robber, who had a lengthy criminal record, lying in a pool of his own blood and surrounded by enraged locals. A video would show the unconscious man being kicked in the head by one member of the mob as a police officer asked him to stop. 3 years prior, Cesar had been shot in the leg during another violent robbery. Unfortunately, his heroic attempt to save his brother would prove fatal. Cesar, who'd recently welcomed a baby daughter, succumbed to his gunshot injury in a local hospital about 5 hours later. Guero died as well as a result of the brutal beatdown to which he'd been subjected. A friend of the Jimenez brothers, 30-year-old Bricio Paez, later told the media, "The scum got what he deserved. If you kill one of ours, you will get killed too. It's the rule of law, our law." Lynch mobs were reported as a rather common occurrence in Tucumán and its neighboring regions. The week prior to the fatal shooting of Cesar, a mobile phone thief was beaten into unconsciousness by locals. At the end of 2014, 4 other similar instances of vigilante justice were reported in the region. Number 8. Terryon Pouncy. On October the 31st of 2017, 2 employees of the Maxwell Street Express hot dog venue were held at gunpoint on Chicago's South Side. The culprit, subsequently identified as 19-year-old Terryon Pouncy, demanded cash from the 2 unnamed men, reported as aged 39 and 45. The teenager, whose social media featured a picture of him with a stack of bills and an air mattress in the background, allegedly held the handgun pressed against the younger man's head. As the pair handed their wallets over, a bucket of grease spilled over and the money was sent flying. Pouncy collected the bills, tucked the handgun in his waistband and fled the scene. In a karmic twist of events, as he ran away, the loaded gun went off in his pants and a bullet clipped his manhood. He was left in severe pain and reportedly called 911 from a few blocks away, claiming he'd been shot. Law enforcement arrested him at Christ Hospital, where they recovered the workers' wallets along with a .38 caliber firearm. Pouncy was charged with 2 counts of armed robbery and denied bond in the aftermath. Number 7. South London Karma. an unidentified man who was only reported as being in his 20s accidentally shot himself in Sydenham, South London, in the fall of 2019. According to eyewitnesses, a group of men were sitting in a car by a Lloyd's bank when they were approached by a big guy wearing a balaclava and armed with a shotgun. The vehicle's occupants ran off and weren't harmed, but reports differed on what followed. Since his intended targets had gotten away, the man tried to inflict damage on their car. In one version of events, he fired at the window and was struck with a ricochet. Another witness claimed that he was hitting the window with the back of the weapon when it went off in his hands. He immediately collapsed in front of a black Peugeot and remained motionless. 3 of his presumed accomplices, all similarly clad and wearing balaclavas, got close and stood next to him, with one gesturing wildly to the others while shouting, "He shot himself!" They then fled before the Metropolitan Police arrived to cordon off the area and start investigating the incident. The shooter was pronounced dead at the scene, and reports released to the media in the days that followed indicated that no arrests had been made. Number 6. Isaac Bonsu. While trying to evade law enforcement in Alexandria, Virginia, a 30-year-old man was run over by his own vehicle. The incident, captured by a dash cam, took place in the spring of 2018. Fairfax County Police initiated a traffic stop after spotting a car that had illegal window tint. The driver, Isaac Bonsu, led the cruisers on a chase before eventually deciding to abandon his vehicle and flee on foot. He neglected to put it in park and jumped out as the car was still moving. Bonsu started running towards the side of the road and initially got in front of the vehicle, but wasn't fast enough to avoid it. He was consequently run over and briefly disappeared under the hood. Bonsu sustained minimal injuries in the self-inflicted accident. He quickly got up and tried to continue his flight from justice, but his momentum had been impeded by the car strike long enough for an officer to catch up to him. Bonsu was charged with driving while intoxicated for a 3rd time, according to his criminal record, in addition to felony hit and run and having an illegal window tint on his car. Some of the online users reacting to the incident remarked that it was a powerful example of karma at work, with some flavoring their quips by replacing the K in the word with a C. Number 5. Lamborghini Driver. In the summer of 2018, car enthusiasts gathered in Key West, Florida, for an event called Auto Pride. During the rally, the driver of a Lamborghini Huracan decided to go the extra mile for the crowd, who'd gathered to watch the supercars parading through the city's main street. The unnamed man got out of the high-performance car and made sure that people were taking pictures before jumping onto its windshield and posing. Within seconds, his showboating was thwarted by karma when the glass cracked under his feet and the windshield became indented. The driver maintained the pose he'd adopted, seemingly unaffected by the incident. His female companion, who'd previously been cheering while hanging out of the passenger side window, was visibly distressed by the damage. Upon returning to the vehicle, estimated at several $100,000, the driver immediately clutched his face in embarrassment. Reacting to the incident, one Reddit user theorized that while windshields are generally fairly strong, the Huracans could have already had a crack in it. The break would have thus caused it to shatter further under the stress of the driver's weight. Number 4. Joe Sotelo. A 52-year-old woman from Kingsport, Tennessee, responded to a knock on her door in the spring of 2017. She opened it and was met by a younger woman who was holding a flyer about a missing dog. Within seconds, a masked man grabbed the unidentified homeowner, shouted, "This is a robbery!" and tried to pull her outside. She managed to partially remove his mask in the struggle and instantly recognized him as Joe Sotelo, a 34-year-old longtime family friend. In spite of being over a foot shorter and 100 pounds lighter than Sotelo, the homeowner grabbed a baseball bat and started fiercely fighting back, striking the man in the face. She received support from 2 18-year-old females who were inside the home at the time, and the trio drove Sotelo to the front lawn. The woman who'd held the dog flyer, later identified as the would-be robber's girlfriend and accomplice, drove away in their car. Sotelo had tried getting into the vehicle with her, but couldn't break free from the women's charge. He eventually managed to run away and was later arrested, with a processing photo showing him with a swollen face. He admitted to the robbery attempt, claiming he'd been going through some hard times. Number 3. Thomas Scara. On November the 26th of 2010, New York man Thomas Scara struck his wife with a can of peas at their Staten Island residence. The man had recently returned from Staten Island State University Hospital, where he'd spent a few days for treatment, reportedly connected to his diabetes. He became enraged that Blanche, his 59-year-old spouse, hadn't paid the $5.75 a day fee for him to watch cable TV during his hospitalization. The man was said to have exerted full authority over their TV set at home and would attack Blanche whenever he caught her watching anything. The woman was left with a brain injury after Scara had assaulted her on November the 19th. About a week later, the injury began to hemorrhage when he smashed the can of peas over her head. The police took 2 domestic violence reports, but Blanche refused to press charges. She complained of nausea and headaches before going to bed on November the 26th and was found dead on the sofa the following day. Her passing was ruled a homicide after an autopsy determined she had succumbed to blunt force trauma associated with the successive beatings. Scara, then in his 50s, eventually pleaded guilty to criminally negligent homicide and was slated to be sentenced to 5 years of probation on July the 24th of 2012. He would actually end up being buried on that day after a fatal accident at his Tottenville home. On July the 12th, Scara choked on a piece of chicken bone and was found unresponsive. He died about a week later at Staten Island University Hospital. Blanche's sister, who'd once referred to Scara as a sociopath, later told a media outlet he got what he deserved. He's a chicken. The chicken got served. Number 2. Gregory Mallum. Leading up to August the 18th of 2008, bartender Gregory Mallum had long been feuding with his neighbors over the noise he was making at his home in Botley, Oxfordshire, England. On that date, the police turned up at his home following a complaint. He assumed that it had been made by Frank Corti, a man in his early 70s. The next day at around 8 a.m. he broke into Corti's home, armed with a bladed knuckle duster, intending to rob him. He'd expected to find a defenseless elderly man, but in his youth, Corti had been a champion boxer. In addition to serving with the Royal Engineers in North Africa from 1956 to 1958, Corti, who was home with his wife at the time, intercepted 24-year-old Mallum and dodged when he lunged at him with the knife. In spite of being 3 times the burglar's senior, he then landed 2 devastating punches to his head during the ensuing struggle. Corti, who suffered minor injuries, subdued the dazed Mallum, who was also reportedly intoxicated at the time, until the authorities arrived to take him into custody. The latter's processing photo showed him with a severely blackened eye and lip, injuries that left him looking like he'd been in an accident. According to court documents, Corti's stand made headlines when Mallum was sentenced to 4.5 years in prison for aggravated burglary. Number 1. Naisha HarrisBrazel. Naisha HarrisBrazel, a Milwaukee Burger King employee in her late teens, was shot and killed during a robbery gone wrong on January the 2nd of 2022. At the time, HarrisBrazel was working the night shift alongside her best friend Mariah Edwards. Surveillance footage caught a Chevy Impala pull up to the drive-through window. A man with a face mask then got out, crawled through the window and began waving a gun, demanding cash from HarrisBrazel. She scrambled to get the money out of the register while crying out for help, but was ultimately shot. It was initially believed that the robber had gunned her down for taking too long with the cash. However, closer examination of the surveillance footage revealed that he'd never fired his weapon. HarrisBrazel's fellow employee, Derek Ellis, had responded to her distressed pleas and shot at the robber, but inadvertently hit her instead. 35-year-old Ellis fled the scene in the immediate aftermath because, as a felon, he was banned from carrying a handgun. He would later be arrested, and as part of a plea negotiation, the negligent homicide charge was dropped and he only pleaded guilty to gun possession. The investigation was marked by a disturbing twist when the masked robber was eventually revealed as 41-year-old Antoine Edwards, Mariah's father. According to a criminal complaint, the teen, her father, and HarrisBrazel had staged the robbery together. They'd planned to hit the Burger King location on a day when they knew the cash register, to which HarrisBrazel was usually assigned, would be full. Edwards admitted to the staged robbery but tried to insulate Mariah, claiming that HarrisBrazel had been his only accomplice. Ellis who'd attempted to protect the teenager but ended up accidentally killing her, was not in on the plan. Edward was subsequently charged with felony murder and possession of a firearm by a felon. Thanks for watching. For a year, would you rather receive a sponsorship from a fashion brand of your choosing or eat for free at your favorite restaurant? Let us know in the comments section below.